All right, guys, should be a pretty quick lesson today. We're going to look at George H.W. Bush, aka George Bush. What's confusing is there's the father, who's the president, and then you're going to learn the son, very shortly. The father at this particular point in time is known as Bush 41 today. All right, and there's really only one major thing you need to know for the regents. I just want to speak of a couple of other things. He's only president for 4 years. He doesn't get elected to a second term. Um, he comes in as Ronald Reagan's vice president and wins election in 1989. And a big reason because he was very since Reagan was very popular and he was his vice president. He kind of comes in, so there's pretty high expectations for him. But he ends up starting off his presidency really well, but then things kind of falter. So just a couple of things before I get into this actual thing here. George H.W. Bush economy kind of took a tumble. Basically, in his campaign, he promised no new taxes, but realized that our deficit was growing. And then eventually in 1990, he had to pass some new taxes, which made him look bad because he said, read my lips, no new taxes. And that wasn't so good. So that kind of hurt him. And we went into a little bit of a recession under him. There was also one good thing he did was he appointed the first ever women Supreme Court Justice, Sandra Day O'Connor, which I'm stunned is not on the regions, to be honest. But yeah, not on the regions, but Sandra Day O'Connor was the first woman to serve on the Supreme Court and appointed by George H.W. Bush. That was a great moment for him. But essentially, his presidency for the regions comes down to this one major thing here, which is called the Persian Gulf War, which is also known as Operation Desert Storm. So we're going to turn our attention back to the Middle East again. Okay, so this is an area we've been focused on. If you remember with the Camp David Accords, we focused on Israel and Egypt over here. Now we're going to focus in on Iraq right over here and this small country here called Kuwait, because this is where the Persian Gulf War is going to take place. And the reason why it gets this name is if you look here, this is the Persian Gulf. All right, this is the water leading to the peninsula of Kuwait. And we're going to look at how this kind of breaks down. So this is the Persian Gulf War. But if you remember the War Powers Act, you have 60 days to basically carry out any war operations before declaring war. And this is what we kind of do. All right, we're able to get this operation done in only 6 weeks. So it's a rather short war, but it's not definitely a very important war. Okay. So it lasted only 6 weeks. The dictator of Iraq, Saddam Hussein, okay, this guy right here, sent 100,000 troops who had biological and chemical weapons into Kuwait. So the leader of this country, Iraq, is a guy we do not like. Pretty much ruthless dictator. Okay, one of the most ruthless dictators in the Middle East. Killed a lot of his own people throughout his regime that opposed him. Very, very tough leader against his own people. Plus, we found out he was illegally using biological and chemical weapons against his own people. All right, now he's going to take those weapons into Kuwait. All right, so the United States and the UN demanded Hussein leave Kuwait immediately. All right, because Kuwait at the time was trading oil with the rest of the world. Literally, one of our biggest consumers was Kuwait. We got all of our oil through, not oil, all of it, but most of our oil through them. And they traded a lot of oil with other countries. So even though it's a very small country, there's a high level of oil in this area. All right. So since Saddam Hussein went and basically tried to take Kuwait over, and there's a lot of oil there, all right, that they're trading with the rest of the world, we and the United Nations are going to basically see that as an attack. We don't want, kind of like the Korean War, we don't want a country taking over another country, right, especially when we have good trade relations with them. America and the UN attacked the Iraqi troops, and we won the 6 week war with ease. Pretty simple. We actually had the first ever GPS trackers. We had drones at this time. Our military capacity and technology was far greater than Iraq had, so we were pretty good. Once we win the war, oil in Kuwait was reopened to all countries in the world. However, Hussein was not removed from power, and this would come up again later. We will actually find out in 1992, after the war, Saddam Hussein tried to assassinate secretly the president of the United States. It was unsuccessful. So they had a lot of animosity towards one another. And this will come up again later because Saddam Hussein is going to be a big person when the son takes over as president in about 10 years. All right. But for now, Operation Desert Storm has to do with Kuwait. All right. We win the war without much of a problem, and we're able to keep Kuwait trading with the rest of the world. All right, what you're going to do after is we're going to do this reading together, and then you're going to have to answer these questions. All right, so let's just go through it. So the Persian Gulf War is also known as Operation Desert Storm. All right, so Kuwait is a small country at the southern tip of Iraq and the northeast corner of Saudi Arabia. It received protection from Great Britain from the late 1800s until 1961. At this time, it was recognized as an independent country. It became increasingly important in the 1930s when oil was discovered there. By the early 1990s, Kuwait was the second largest exporter of oil in the world. So I think Saudi Arabia was one, and then they were two. Right? And it's just such a small country, but it's literally a huge output of oil. All right. Kuwait's independence was threatened in the 1990s by their northern neighbor, Iraq. Led by Saddam Hussein, Iraq accused Kuwait of stealing oil from the reserves at the two countries' shared border. Oil prices had dropped very low, and Hussein believed Kuwait's leaders were trying to keep oil prices low for Western countries like the United States. All right, despite attempts by Arab countries to solve the issues Iraq's leader had against Kuwait, Saddam Hussein ordered Iraq to invade Kuwait on August 2, 1990. Many Arab countries and Western countries such as the United States, Great Britain, and the Soviet Union condemned Hussein's invasion of the country, basically saying what Saddam Hussein's doing is wrong. But condemning does not mean you're going to send soldiers. It's just kind of publicly saying that what they're doing is wrong. These countries needed the oil that was produced in this region, and they cannot stand by and do nothing. Within a week, military aircraft began arriving in the area to help prevent an invasion into Saudi Arabia. These aircraft came from the United States and Great Britain, among other countries. This buildup of military strength was termed Operation Desert Shield or Operation Desert Storm. There's like so many names, I'm sorry. Iraq likewise began sending troops to Kuwait, and within the same week, over 300,000 Iraqi troops were occupying the country. So this has become a full-blown problem. By the end of November of 1990, the UN Security Council proved force against Iraq if they did not leave Kuwait immediately. Right, so the UN Security Council is like the United Nations military, basically, and the United States, along with a lot of other countries, China, Mexico, Great Britain, France, are all a part of there. Iraq refused to surrender Kuwait. So on January 17, 1991, the United States, under the leadership of President George H.W. Bush, launched an attack on Iraqi's military defenses, communications resources, and oil refineries. All right. Innovative technology was used for the first time in history. An entire military strike ended an enemy's ability to engage in a battle without a single person stepping foot in the region. So this is how modern warfare looks now more today. Instead of sending in 100,000 soldiers to an area, we just use certain tactical bombs and missiles to take out what we want. All right, and usually successfully. This invasion was a combined effort of many countries and was called Operation Desert Storm. A group force was eventually authorized in mid-February. Some Iraqi forces were removed and others abandoned their posts. About 5 weeks after it began, the Persian Gulf War ended. Hussein's agreed to recognize Kuwait's independence and remove weapons of mass destruction from Iraq's military stores. The war was not a complete victory for the coalition of 34 countries that opposed Iraq's invasion. However, it was a decisive victory with minimal loss of life. Hussein retained power in Iraq, and this would eventually lead to further conflict in the future. So this was the problem. Once Hussein was, this was something where we should have tried to remove the dictator of Iraq right there, but we don't, and this will come back and bite us in the butt a little bit later, as you'll see. All right, so you're going to answer these questions here. All right, you could just answer them on a Google Doc or in your notebook, whatever is easiest for you. You will not be able to write on this. I apologize. So maybe just do it on a Google Doc. A lot of it's multiple choice questions anyway. All right, let's just finish with these regions questions, and then we are out of here. One direct result of the Persian Gulf War was that the United States what? What is a direct result? All right, correct answer is 2. If you didn't know liberated meant free, All right, Kuwait from Iraqi control. That is correct. Liberated is to free, and Kuwait became an independent country or was recognized as an independent country after this war. In 1991, one of the reasons President George H.W. Bush committed United States troops to the Persian Gulf War was to what? Why did the president want to put the troops there? All right, so if you remember that the war had to do with oil, and in Kuwait, you should know that the correct answer is going to be four: assure the flow of Middle East oil to the United States and its allies. All right, tomorrow we're moving on to Bill Clinton, who's definitely an interesting president because he does a lot of good things, but then will get impeached at some point. So we'll take a look at that. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you tomorrow.